So can people, there we go. Good morning. Sorry for the slight delay in starting. Happy to be here. I am Felicia Marcus, the chair of the board, and today is Wednesday, November 8th at 9:35 or so a.m. I'll begin by introducing our board members and staff. To my right, Vice Chair Stephen Moore, who ably led the meeting yesterday in my absence. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
To my left, board member Didi Diadamo, and to her left, board member Joaquin Esquivel. Ms. Sobeck, will you introduce the staff that's assisting today?
Thank you, Chair Marcus. To my left, I have our Chief Counsel, Michael Loffer, and to my right, my Chief Deputies, Jonathan Bishop and Eric Oppenheimer, and assisting us is the Clerk to the Board, Janine Townsend, and her assistant, Courtney Tyler.
Thanks so much. Also, know that the meeting is being webcast and recorded, so please be sure to speak into the microphone when you come up to speak, and please turn off or silence all cell phones and beepers if you didn't forget and leave them at home like I did today. Sobeck, are you going to introduce item number 7? We're going to move right into it. Let me just thank both the staff and all the folks who came to present on item number 7. I think we're at an inspiring time in history, and as one of the many of you out there who have lived through a variety of efforts on the LA River, I'm just looking forward to getting an update on where things stand today and some of the exciting plans that you all have, not just for the river, but also for recycling, stormwater capture, and the like. There's an amazing amount happening in the LA area, and it's truly inspiring and wonderful to see. That's all. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. I know we have an orchestrated agenda of speakers, and then we'll take public comment as well. So with that, do I turn it to you all? Mr. McGuire, are you leading the band, or Ms. Fernandez? Great.
Good morning, Chair Marcus, board members. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Marcus, board members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Patricia Fernandez, and I am a Senior Water Resources Engineer in the Division of Water Rights at the State Water Board in the Petition, Licensing, and Registration section. I will be reviewing the purpose and agenda for today's information item on the Los Angeles River, existing and future conditions, in stream flow needs. The purpose of this item is the following. 1, to summarize the demand for limited water resources of the Los Angeles River that can also apply to other Southern California rivers. 2, to provide updates on recycled water programs, water supply augmentation, and river planning efforts. And 3, to discuss the need to balance various beneficial uses. First, we will discuss state regulatory roles. The Division of Water Rights will give an overview of the Los Angeles River and water rights role. Then, the LA Regional Board will discuss NPDES permitting and basin plan beneficial uses. Then the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will discuss their regulatory role. Next, the cities of Burbank, Glendale, and Los Angeles will give an overview of their proposed projects. Then, for the future of the Los Angeles River, Mark Gold from UCLA will present the LA Sustainable Water Project. For the last presentation, the City of Los Angeles, offer of Mayor Garcetti, will present the Los Angeles River Revitalization. At the end, there will be time for public comment. Now I will turn to Sean McGuire, who will make the presentation for the Division of Water Rights.
Thank you, Patricia. My name is Sean McGuire. I'm the program manager for the Petition, Licensing, and Registration section in
the Division of Water Rights at the State Water Resources Control Board. The development of the Los Angeles River has a storied history, which you'll hear about from many of our presenters today. I'll speak to you briefly about the Los Angeles River and the Division of Water Rights' current role. The picture you see on the screen from the LA River Revitalization Master Plan and from left to right shows the changes that occurred to the river as it was channelized for flood and urbanization, and as urbanization took hold in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It is the changing character of the river that brings us here. The LA River starts in the Simi Hills and Santa Susana Mountains and flows through LA County from Canoga Park in the western end of the San Fernando Valley, nearly 51 miles southeast to its mouth in Long Beach. There are a few major tributary streams to the river, including Tujunga Wash, Verdugo Wash, Arroyo Seco, and others. In the 1930s, for flood control purposes, the LA River was channelized and concrete lined in many sections. Some sections are soft bottom, which you'll hear more about today from other speakers. Water sources to the LA River are highly limited. During the wet season, the river sees a mixture of flood flows from stormwater runoff, along with wastewater treatment plant discharges from 3 existing facilities. During the dry season, flow to the river is primarily effluent driven, where approximately 80% of the flow comes from wastewater treatment plant discharges. Groundwater upwelling occurs in some portions of the river, which is the reason some sections are soft bottom. This picture shows water in the low flow channel of the river. There are 3 wastewater treatment facilities that discharge to the LA River. Donald C. Tillman Water Reclamation Plant, owned and operated by the City of Los Angeles, shown on the left. Burbank Water Reclamation Plant, owned and operated by the City of Burbank. And the Los Angeles Glendale Water Reclamation Plant, jointly owned by the City of Los Angeles and City of Glendale. There are many responsibilities of the state and regional water board as it pertains to wastewater discharges and water recycling. The State Water Resources Control Board sets statewide policy for recycled water use and waste discharge requirements. The Regional Water Quality Control Boards develop basin plans and issue National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits for wastewater treatment facilities, which dictate the quality and quantity of water discharged to surface waters. The State Water Resources Control Board is also responsible for administering water rights, including projects that would reduce a discharge to a water course. For example, a wastewater change petition may be required if a discharger is currently discharging 100 acre-feet of water per year to a stream and would like to reduce discharge by 10 acre-feet for golf course irrigation. Wastewater change petitions are a type of petition filed with the State Water Board's Division of Water Rights. They are required by Water Code Section 1211. The code states that prior to making any change in the point of discharge, place of use, or purpose of use of treated wastewater, the owner of any wastewater treatment plant shall obtain approval of the board for that change. The board shall review the changes pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 10, commencing with Section 1700 of Part 2 of Division 2. Part B says Subdivision A does not apply to changes in the discharge or use of treated wastewater that do not result in decreasing the flow in any portion of the water course. Subdivision B applies when the wastewater discharges to the ocean, for example. State Water Board approval is not required because such changes do not reduce the flow in a water course. Wastewater change petitions are processed in accordance with Water Code Section 1700 and following. The State Water Board, by statute and regulation, must make certain findings in order to approve a change petition, including that the change will not, in effect, initiate a new right, not injure any legal user of water, including the environment, and that the changes are in the public interest. The State Water Board also must find that the petition complies with the requirements of the Fish and Game Code and the Federal Endangered Species Act, which you'll hear more about shortly. This slide shows the pending wastewater change petitions that could affect flows in the Los Angeles River. The City of Burbank has 2 change petitions pending, and the City of Glendale has 1. Approval of these petitions are required in support of planned recycled water projects of both cities, in part due to the reduced discharge to the river that could be realized from these projects over time. The petitions were publicly noticed in the spring of this year and are currently in process. In addition to the current wastewater change petitions on the LA River, The State Water Board is also processing petitions around the state, including some other coastal streams in Southern California for the City of Rialto, San Bernardino Municipal Water Department, as well as the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts. The City of Rialto and San Bernardino, MWD, involved reduced wastewater discharges to the Santa Ana River, and the LA County Sanitation District projects involve reduced discharges to the San Gabriel River. Although all these rivers are unique and have different needs, flow through different communities, and have varied ecosystem values, they're similar in that they can be effluent dominated during the dry season. As a reminder of the necessary balancing of public trust resources, the State Water Board's recycled water policy, which was most recently amended in 2013, includes a goal to promote the use of recycled water while protecting public health and water quality through consistent, streamlined permitting of recycled water projects. The recycled water policy includes a statewide goal of recycling 1.8 million cubic meters of water per year, which is 1 million acre feet, by 2020. According to the 2015 Recycled Water Survey, the state is currently at approximately 714,000 acre feet. This chart shows that while the state has made some progress towards increasing recycled water use, there's still a long way to go and a lot of opportunity. We will continue to see innovative recycled water projects develop in coming years, and the balancing of limited resources will become more challenging, particularly in seasonally effluent-dominated streams. And with that, I'm going to have the Los Angeles Regional Water Board come up and speak about their work.
Before you do that, Mr. McGuire, thanks for the overview. You may not have the answer off the top of your head, but I'm interested in knowing the wastewater change petitions that are under consideration by the division. If our Division of Financial Assistance has participated in the development of those proposals.
We work very closely with the Division of Financial Assistance. The City of Pasadena, which has an agreement with the City of Glendale for a portion of their recycled water, has an application currently in process with Division of Financial Assistance, and so we're working with them on moving that forward.
I just asked that to demonstrate the many moving parts in our agency around water recycling.
Very much so.
Thanks.
Dean, you're going to give Sean a medal for his. No one will have identity crises on the webcast. Good. Thank you. Hi, all.
Okay, mic is on. Good morning, Chair Marcus and board members. My name is Deb Smith, and I'm the Chief Deputy Executive Officer of the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board. I know that it's the second day of your workshop, and I'd like to again welcome you, and welcome you, Felicia, today to our region. And it's really nice when you guys come down and occasionally have meetings or workshops here to talk about issues important to us and the other regional boards in Southern California. The issue of what flows are needed in our coastal streams has been a topic of discussion with increasing regularity in the region and probably around the state, being spurred in part by the issues in the Ventura River watershed, given its inclusion as a priority stream system in the California Water Action Plan. And in general, with our realization with increasing recycling and injection and stormwater capture, that this will all necessitate decisions like the one that you're initiating discussions for here today for the LA River.
And it's not unique to the LA area either. So.
No, it's not. And when we started looking at historical flows and other information on the Ventura River, we realized that we all use the word flow rather broadly, and that in Southern California, and probably not just in Southern California, it's not often the actual flow that's the endpoint of the discussion. Rather, we've learned through discussions on the Ventura River and a little bit with as we delve into the LA River, that it's more about maintaining pools and pool depths, river depths, and other conditions that are really key to maintaining habitat and aquatic life and wildlife beneficial uses throughout the year. So you'll hear a little bit more about that later in our discussion, but I sort of wanted to point out that it's not just simply, this much flow passing by. It's what's really creating those habitats. Because, for example, in the Ventura River, all the flow may, no matter how much flow you put in, it might go subsurface, with the exception of some of these pools and other habitats, and that's what we have to zero in on. So as you are well aware, the regional basin plans designate the myriad beneficial uses for our watersheds throughout the region. Different reaches of the LA River have different uses, different types of uses. Some are existing, some are potential. There's some 22 odd beneficial uses that we have in our basin plans for the various rivers. And these uses in many cases will have very specific requirements for things like depth, which we'll be talking about. Models that explore the impacts of flow reductions will need to address these needs throughout the watershed. There are also a few uncertainties as we plan for flows in the river. We anticipate more use and varied uses of the river as revitalization efforts unfold over time. Most of these decisions haven't been made at this point, and we also don't know if any of those will be requiring taking water out of the river. We also know that climate change will be altering the region's hydrology over time, and most predictions, although they don't anticipate an overall reduction in precipitation, do predict more extreme events, wet and dry, that could affect low flows in the river. So I'll now turn the presentation over to Chris Morris, who's seated 2 seats down. She's our chief of the Municipal Permitting Unit, who's going to orient you to the river and also the 3 major POTWs that discharge to the river, and also recycle water, which is extremely important to a region for sustainability and less use of potable water and imported water supplies. She will also be providing a general overview of beneficial uses in the river, and she will be followed then by Shirley Borosic, who's our watershed coordinator and a certified ecologist, who's going to discuss some of the interesting aquatic resource considerations in various parts of the river. So we look forward to hearing all of the presentations and discussions today on this very important matter, and we'll be happy to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chris Morris. There are 3 municipal treatment plants that discharge tertiary treated effluent to the Los Angeles River. These are the DC Tillman Water Reclamation Plant, or WRP, the Los Angeles Glendale WRP, and the Burbank WRP. This picture in the background of this slide is one of the Japanese gardens, one of the destinations for the treated effluent from the DC Tillman plant. The DC Tillman, LA Glendale, and Burbank plants are part of a network of facilities, and they all have similar treatment systems. The treated effluent that is not currently recycled from each of these plants is discharged to the LA River or a tributary of the LA River. During dry weather, effluent from these 3 plants, along with urban runoff, are the primary sources of water flow in the LA River. There is very little natural flow upstream of the plants. The DC Tillman plant is located in the northeastern section of the LA River watershed and is within the Sepulveda Dam Basin. It serves approximately 1.1 million people and has a dry weather design capacity of 80 million gallons per day, or MGD, and currently discharges to the river an average of 27 MGD. The Tillman plant discharges tertiary treated wastewater to the LA River directly and via the Japanese Garden Lake, the Wildlife Lake, Haskell Channel, and Lake Balboa, which overflows into Bull Creek and Havenhurst Channel. The picture in the right-hand corner shows the discharge to Balboa Lake. The Los Angeles Glendale plant and the treated effluent are jointly and equally owned by the City of Los Angeles and the City of Glendale. The plant serves approximately 380,000 people and has a dry weather design capacity of 20 MGD and discharges an average of 10 MGD directly into the Los Angeles River. The Burbank plant has a dry weather design capacity of 12.5 MGD and discharges an average of 12.5 and discharges an average of 5.3 MGD. The Burbank plant serves approximately 105,000 people. The facility discharges into the Burbank Western Channel, 12,000 feet from the confluence of the Los Angeles River. The picture on the right was taken one day after a modest rain event. This graph compares the flows from the 3 treatment plants during 2015. The blue bars represent the DC Tillman plant, the red bars represent the LA Glendale plant, and the green bars are for the Burbank plant. The first cluster on the left represent the maximum flow that each plant is designed to treat. The DC Tillman design capacity, based on the current configuration of the plant, has twice the design capacity of LA Glendale. The middle set of bars shows the average discharge to surface waters. As you can see, all 3 plants are operating below their design capacity. The last cluster on the right represents the amount of produced effluent that was recycled. The numbers on the bottom express that quantity in terms of MGD, while the numbers on the top represent the percent recycled effluent out of the amount of effluent produced. The uses of recycled water include landscape irrigation, cooling tower makeup, and industrial uses. Please note that the Tillman plant discharges to a few lakes, but the recycled water numbers do not take those flows into account. In addition, the Los Angeles Groundwater Replenishment Project that is projected to be completed by the City of LA in 2023 will provide up to 27 MGD, or 30,000 acre-feet per year, of treated water from the plant to the Hanson and Pacoima spreading grounds. All of these facilities currently have plans to increase the amount of recycled water that they distribute. Both the cities of Glendale and Burbank have submitted their 1211 applications to the Division of Water Rights, as Sean mentioned, to reduce the amount of effluent they discharge to the river. And now I would like to just take a minute to talk about the Regional Water Board's responsibility with respect to Section 401 of the Clean Water Act. The Regional Water Board issues 401 water quality certifications for any project in regional waters that requires a federal permit or license and may discharge into a water of the United States. To obtain a 401 certification, the project must comply with all applicable water quality standards, limitations, and restrictions. The projects that are typical for the LA River are the maintenance of outlets, concrete slopes and walls, any LA River improvement construction, maintenance of earth bottom and concrete lined channels for flood control, and the LA River Revitalization Project, which you will hear about in a later presentation. The picture here is an artist rendering of one of those projects. As shown by this slide, the beneficial uses of the LA River are varied and are designated by reach, including those in the estuary. As shown for reaches 1 through 6, there are multiple beneficial uses for these sections of the river. Different beneficial uses require differing levels of water quality, and as we are discussing here today, different quantities of water. One of the Rec 1 activities in 2 sections of the LA River is kayaking. This activity is managed by the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, and it is only conducted between May and September. Due to depth limitations, this Rec 1 use currently occurs in 2 sections of the river, in the Elysian Valley section and in the Sepulveda Basin. Further down the river, another Rec 1 use is swimming and wading, as evidenced by these photos. There are also many homeless people living around and bathing in the river. Now I'm going to turn this over to Shirley Brosick, who will be discussing the habitat beneficial uses.
Good morning, Chair Marcus and board members. My name is Shirley Barosic, and I am a senior environmental scientist with the Regional Programs section of the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board. This slide shows an example of one of the more obvious habitat areas in an unlined portion of the river. With its more natural river bottom, somewhat reduced flows would likely continue to sustain the vegetation. Since there isn't a regular bottom, even with reduced flows, there would be some water left for the ducks to feed in. This wildlife beneficial use of wading shorebirds in a concrete section of the river is highly dependent on depth of water that extends outward from the cut low flow channel. These are sections of the river that have no vegetation and are sometimes viewed as having no habitat value. Birds rest in these areas or feed on algae or the insects or other invertebrates associated with the algae in water depths of about 1/2 inch to 2.5 inches. Flow is important, mostly in terms of how it translates into depth of water in the gradually sloping bottom. Here's another picture of birds utilizing a concrete section of the river. These shallow areas appear to function as lost natural coastal wetlands. We now have these surrogate wetlands being used in place of the vast seasonal wetlands that were historically in the LA Basin, supported by high groundwater and springs and that fluctuated during changing seasons and water years. Although the basin plan designates these concrete sections of the river as having only a potential wildlife beneficial use, the use is clearly existing. Thousands of shorebirds utilize these areas each year. In fact, over 5,000 birds were counted during a single 2-hour survey in 1999, and over 15,000 were seen during the fall of 2000. These survey results were reported respectively in the LA River Recycle Water Optimization Study issued in 2003 and during the Lower LA River Shorebird Habitat Workshop sponsored by the Wetlands Recovery Project and the Palos Verdes South Bay Audubon Society, which was held in 2004. Any additional studies or models conducted really need to recognize the existing wildlife beneficial use that must be protected in these areas. The graphic on the left shows a concrete line stretch of the river south of downtown LA. The middle black transit has the green arrow going toward it. It is shown as a cross-section of the river on the right. This is being shown to illustrate how gradually the bottom floodplain, quote unquote, slopes outside of that cut low flow channel. While flow might be maintained sufficiently in the cut low flow channel to allow for kayaking, reducing overall flow may reduce the floodplain water depth needed to sustain functional bird habitat. So in this cross-section, the first horizontal line up is 4 feet, and the next one up is 8 feet. So the cut low flow channel is, the top of it is approximately 3 feet deep, and the sloping area to the side, what I call the floodplain, is not even 4 feet up, so it's very gradually sloping. So flow is especially important in relation to depth in these gradually sloping floodplain areas. And most existing flood gauges do not accurately measure very low flows. Additional gauges calibrated to detect low flows may need to be installed in sections of the line channel where cross-sectional profiles change. And there are a number of different cross-sectional profiles depending on where you are in the river, in order to be able to obtain the necessary information for successful modeling of the effects of reduced flows. Just taking a couple studies that one I mentioned, the LA Flow Optimization Study, and then a more recent one done by UCLA. Although the earlier one in 2003 did not have quantitative modeling, there was more qualitative modeling done. They both show that if you reduce all of the POTW effluent and reduce the majority of the urban runoff, flows near the bottom of the watershed could be reduced by 50 to 70%. And the question is, well, how does that translate into the inches lost? The existing wildlife beneficial use in the critical bird feeding areas need to be included in any future flow studies to protect this beneficial use of the LA River. Using the existing channel cross-sections, the existing flow models could be adapted to model changes in the depth due to variations of flow. Engineering solutions such as flow deflectors might be feasible to maintain the bird feeding areas with a further reduction in flow. There may also be an opportunity to work with, or at least coordinate with, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation on their soon-to-start low-flow channel ecosystem services study. The intent of that study is to model the effects of redesigning the riverbed to provide ecosystem value at low flows for target fish species such as steelhead trout, Santa Ana sucker, or royal chub, while not raising the flood risk during higher flows. Redesign elements could include changing the channel roughness, changing or adding flow deflectors, adding cobble, adding a meander and or secondary flow paths, or adding refugia, which are the kind of background water areas that fish use. And now I'd like to turn it back to Chris to conclude our presentation.
The Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board regulates discharges from DC Tillman, LA Glendale, and the Burbank water reclamation plants. We also are responsible for the recycled water permits for these 3 plants, and as such, we support and review requests to expand Title 22 non-potable uses for all of these plants, as well as the future groundwater replenishment project for DC Tillman. However, consideration must also be made to protect the beneficial uses of the LA River. As mentioned throughout our presentation, there are many stretches of the river that are clearly important for various aquatic life and wildlife beneficial uses. Depth of water and maintenance of pools is often the important factor in maintaining those areas for habitat, aquatic life, and wildlife. Identifying the in-stream conditions that are currently supporting those depths and what conditions are needed to continue to support aquatic species and the types of habitats that are most ecologically desirable will help to determine to what degree discharges to the river from POTWs may be reduced without impacting those beneficial uses. As noted by the last bullet on this slide, the Regional Water Board recognizes that it will be a formidable challenge to identify these conditions in order to ensure protection of the varied beneficial uses in the river while increasing water recycling and addressing sustainable water supplies for the LA region. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you.
With that, we'll have the Department of Fish and Wildlife come up with a presentation.
Great.
Ready? Oh,
Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
thank you. Good morning, Chair Marcus and Board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Erin Wilson. I'm with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I am the Habitat Conservation Planning Supervisor for LA County, and I am going to provide you an overview on the department's regulatory authority for the river, and then Kelly Schmoker is going to present some of the beneficial uses for the department. How do I? There are several laws and regulations that can be triggered when contemplating the reduction of river flow. I have listed a few here and I will go over each of them. The department is involved in the CEQA process. The department is generally a trustee agency, and our agency is over all of the fish and wildlife resources of the state. The department can become a responsible agency when an entity is proposing to carry out a project that requires approval from the department as a discretionary action, and we rely on the lead agency's CEQA document in preparing our findings. The department can sometimes find itself as a lead agency when there is no underlying CEQA document for that project, or if we find that the lead agency CEQA document is not adequate in covering the biological resources. First of all, the department has permitting over streams under Fish and Game Code section 1600 at SEC. A notification is required. An entity may be required to notify under section 1600 if the activity proposed may substantially divert, obstruct, or alter the flow or change the bed bank and channel of a lake or stream. Notifications are generally not required for wastewater discharge changes, but may be necessary if the diversion is substantial enough to change the hydrology and channel morphology over time and have an adverse effect to fish and wildlife resources downstream. The department also regulates the Endangered Species Act. Title 14 prohibits the take of listed species under CESA, and Fish and Game Code 2080 and 2081 provide the department a mechanism to permit those an authorized incidental take for an otherwise lawful action. The department gets involved in the Endangered Species Act with coordination from the Federal Endangered Species Act. The federal law has policies that require cooperation with state agencies to carry out the Endangered Species Act. The department has spent tens of millions of dollars with the feds to implement restoration of anadromous fish habitat throughout Southern California. The department also has Fish and Game Code 2900 et sec. These sections regulate dams, conduits, and screens. A dam is any obstruction to the river. So Section 5901 identifies certain districts that are under this regulation. 5903 and LA County is one of those districts. 5903 describes dam construction and enlargement process that requires notification to the department. 5931 requires fishways for stream passages over and around dams, so any dam has to have some sort of fish passage. And then 5937 is a requirement to allow sufficient water for fish in good condition below all dams.
That's my personal favorite.
And then we get involved in the water code in the 1211 process. So any petition to change wastewater treatment, the entity must, or the petitioner must notify the department, and then to any extent we can provide information that would affect, that wildlife would be affected, and then be required to provide those measures to the board. And with that, we will move on to beneficial uses. Kelly.
So hi, I'm Kelly Smoker, and I'm going to talk to you about the beneficial uses of the LA River.
Oh, you're on.
Okay, so this is the LA River watershed. It's roughly 51 miles long and flows through 14 cities. 4 reaches of the Los Angeles River are inland. We have upstream of Sepulveda, the dam, the Glendale Narrows area, Compton Creek, which is a tributary to the lower Los Angeles River, and then the estuary below Willow Street in Long Beach. The dry weather period is from May through September, and flows range from 1 CFS at the headwaters up to 194 CFS at the confluence with San Pedro Bay. Flow in the lower watershed is mainly sustained by treated effluent from 3 facilities: the City of Los Angeles, Glendale and Tillman treatment plants, and the City of Burbank's treatment plant. The treatment plant's portion of the total annual stream flow in the Los Angeles River varies both annually and seasonally, and can range from 19% during wet weather flow up to 92% during dry weather flow. So I'm going to take you on a tour of the river, and we're going to start down by the ocean at the estuary. The Los Angeles River estuary is a 1.46 mile long unlined reach between Willow Street Bridge and Queensway Bay. Year-round flow is maintained by urban runoff, treated wastewater, and natural storm flow. Thousands of species depend on estuarine habitat for their life cycle. Wastewater is the primary contributor to dry weather flow. And here's a picture of the Friends of the Los Angeles River. They do, I think, biannual freshwater surveys. This one was in 2016. And they document a lot of the species that utilize the Los Angeles estuary. And here's just a couple more pictures of the Los Angeles estuary looking towards the ocean with downtown Long Beach and Friends of the Los Angeles River doing their fish surveys to document that it does exist and it does have habitat value. And then above the estuary, we have the large concrete lined channel portion. In the concrete portions, the river overtops the channel and spreads, allowing algae, microorganisms, and sun vegetation to establish. This habitat supports a thriving bird community. And small changes in discharge could drastically affect the acreage of shallow water sheeting over concrete during dry flow periods, reducing bird foraging. And this picture kind of shows it really nice. You can see, lots of birds right there, and it's just this shallow sheeting flow over the Los Angeles River that allows algae and microorganisms to thrive, and the birds really use that habitat. Also, reduction of flow could elevate water temperature, especially in concrete-lined portions. Algae have an optimum temperature that when it's exceeded, their photosynthetic enzymes are destroyed, and it reduces algae production. And since algae are responsible for much of the dissolved oxygen found in the surface water, it's kind of necessary for the fish and aquatic organisms to live. So a decrease in this photosynthetic activity is detrimental, and can lead to fish die-offs. So above the concrete line portion that goes through downtown LA, we have the Glendale Narrows. This is a 10-mile portion of the river as it bends around the Hollywood Hills and flows through Griffith and Elysian Park. The water table was too high here, so it was left with a rocky unlined bottom and concrete lined or riprap sides. And the river here is fed by natural upwelling groundwater springs and supports willows, sycamores, and cottonwood. Then above this, we have the Sepulveda Basin. The 2,000-acre Sepulveda Basin recreational area is a flood control basin bisected by the LA River. The river is unlined here and provides habitat for wildlife and recreational opportunities.
How many miles there?
It's 2,000 acres. I think it's maybe like 2 miles, 1.5 miles. So what is the Department of Fish and Wildlife concerned about? Well, there are a lot of species of fish that have historically inhibited the freshwater and estuarine reaches of the LA River, including steelhead, Pacific lamprey, three-spined stickleback, Santa Ana sucker, Santa Ana speckled dace, California killifish, and arroyo chub. And we're concerned to maintain the habitat for those that still utilize the stream and those that have the potential to come back upon restoration. All of these fish have a specific river habitat niche that they occupy, with varying flow velocity, depth, substrate, temperature, vegetation, and water quality requirements. So, and over 300 bird species find the river as a stopover along the Pacific Flyway. About half of the total recorded birds in Los Angeles County have been spotted in the channelized portions of the rivers feeding on invertebrates and algae. The river also supports nesting habitat for the state-listed least Bell's vireo and willow flycatcher birds. And also we have aquatic reptiles and amphibians that utilize the river. And lastly, plants. Plants rely on both surface and ground flow. An analysis of minimum flow requirements or reduction in flow should look at the complex relationship between groundwater and surface water. The riparian communities commonly found throughout the LA River include oak woodland, walnut woodland, willow sycamore woodland, cottonwood woodland, and emergent wetland vegetation. So, the interactions of surface water and groundwater support many key functions of streams and link ecosystem processes through water and nutrient exchanges. And plants adapt to different sources of water use during different times. Many wetland and riparian areas are supported by both surface and groundwater, which should be considered a single resource. Seedlings need surface flow for the first 2 to 3 growing seasons to establish themselves. Roots also serve a function as shown in this graphic. They produce a hydraulic lift, which basically moves soil from both surface and groundwater and redistributes it to drier areas in the soil, which help maintain a healthy riparian understory. Studies have found that depleted groundwater and altered timing and magnitude of flow cause a shift in riparian areas from those dominated by native species to those dominated by non-native invasive species. Additionally, plant responses to altered water availability occur over different timescales, ranging from hours to decades. And there may be a huge lag time between the hydrologic alteration and the plant responses. Additionally, different life stages of the same plant or animal may respond in different ways to the same hydrologic alteration. So just looking to see if a plant looks healthy may be the most sensitive indicator of short-term changes to the hydraulic regime, but it may reveal little about the long-term ecological consequences in water availability, such as population structure or species composition. So here's an example of why plants need surface flow. So this study, using stable isotope analysis, you can determine if a plant is using groundwater or surface water, or a combination of both, as well as the sources of this water through distinct isotopic signatures. So here's a study that used deuterium to kind of track what source of water populous plants were using. These are trees. And it showed that the populous plants used for the first 3 years surface water. They need surface water for the first 3 years to become established. The mature plants used primarily groundwater, and then older plants used a combination of surface and groundwater. The study concluded that seedlings were not phreatophytes, meaning they stick a taproot down to the groundwater, and their survival was not dependent on growing the taproot fast enough to remain connected to the water table, that they needed surface flow for the first 3 years to become established and maintain the community. So in conclusion, Reductions to flow could reduce a significant source for birds, affect native fish, aquatic invertebrate, and amphibian habitat and migration, affect water quality, and could potentially negatively alter the vegetation community of a river. So if you have any questions, here's our contact information.
I do have a question. I appreciate actually describing the biological benefits of the existing setting that you've done here and pointing out some of the mechanisms that exist. But these are not natural flows. The hydrology is not natural. And so when you think about visioning the future, you know, and what is a sustainable biological community, are you looking at factors such as historical ecology, which would maybe better fine-tune the type of biological resources we should plan for? Because the Los Angeles River's hydrology didn't have this steady dry season flow in the past. So isn't it true that this ecosystem is somewhat opportunistic, you know, but yet valuable? And could you explain why it's valuable given it's not really what used to be there for millennia?
So we recognize that the river is highly modified, and it just happens that the water that's available now has created this habitat that supports some of the resources that are part of the remaining habitat left in LA County. And that's the big concern, is that the rest of the county or this watershed has been developed, so the remaining habitat is just the last remaining habitat for those species. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, and luckily a lot of our species are opportunistic and have a wide range of tolerances. And they're kind of at a breaking point where, you know, too much water being taken out of the system it prevents migration of fish where they need to go, amphibians where they need to go. It lowers the water quality beyond that tipping point threshold to where, you know, we might start getting fish kills or just make it uninhabitable for benthic macroinvertebrates or even algae to grow to maintain what bird populations utilize the system. So we acknowledge it's a highly altered system and it's hanging on, and we're just concerned that too many stressors in addition to the stressors already there could potentially tip the system and extirpate, you know, a lot of the species and beneficial uses potentially.
Morris, I think, was talking about alternative habitat and stuff. You probably have all kinds of plans too, and working on wetlands restoration, other things in the area. To also try and do that as
We
well.
don't-
I'm not critiquing it, but it's a bigger picture when you're talking about, like, do you have preferred alternative
I think
sites that you're working on where you're trying to get more natural systems?
I think we
going?
have ideas, we don't have anything in concrete, and I think we're working with the other agencies, with the Corps and in the city to kind of come up with ideas. So, I mean, we're definitely looking for ways to maximize benefits for the species that should be there, and balancing that with the recycled water efforts, so it's a balance.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I think anywhere you put water in the summertime in California, you're gonna get life. It's gonna come, you know, and then it's a question of, okay, what are the balancing questions here, you know, in terms of, is this filling a niche that we've lost due to development, that sort of thing? Or is this something that is just opportunistic life that it can actually be sacrificed?
And I also think that it's helpful to ask the question, how much water is necessary for the resources, instead of how much can we remove before. I think that's important.
Yeah, I thought the notion of the functions in terms of pools and temperature and depth were, I mean, this is interesting, this is helpful to put it all out.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, you know, I'm not a purist. You know, I think that the community gets to really discuss this and decide what, you know, if it's artificial, fine, but if it serves the community's interests, then great, you know. But I think it's a conversation that has to happen, and a lot of trade-offs.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Do you have more questions? Please.
Almost.
First of all, thank you. It's a really good presentation by each one of you. And I appreciate, Board Member Moore, your question and, you know, just the complexity of this and trade-offs. Could you
Yesterday was one big opportunistic discussion that you had yesterday, so.
Definitely. So if you could focus, you had a slide that listed a variety of different species. Could you go back to that slide and maybe focus a little bit on the ones that are listed as threatened or endangered and talk a little bit more about what reach of the river the threatened and endangered species are in?
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, you can help me jump in. So basically, steelhead are a protected species, and as Aaron covered, there's the regulation that prohibits blocking fish passage, and so the Los Angeles River is identified as a steelhead recovery stream, and they have been spotted in the estuary trying to use the river. They just obviously can't make it because the water depth is not, and the concrete is not optimal for them. Also, Pacific lamprey is a fish that is an adromus. It moves from the ocean up, and that's been
state listed.
state listed. And it's been trying, you know, spotted in the estuary, trying to make it up and just can't do it. We also have the fully protected unarmored three-spine stickleback, which that's above the wastewater treatment plant in areas not really affected by reduced discharge, but it is in the river system.
Well, the unarmored three-spine stickleback's not in the LA River, it's in the.
Well, historically, yeah.
Historically.
As the Santa Ana sucker, they tried introducing speckled dace back into the Arroyo Seco, which is a tributary to kind of like the mid-section of the Los Angeles River. And below Devil's Gate Dam, you know, there's a natural stretch of that river. And so they're assumed maybe still present. We haven't done surveys lately, but that fish could be there. Any others I'm missing?
So sucker and dace are federally listed. California killifish, is that state endangered?
That's state, yeah.
And then Oreo chub is federally listed. The bird species, the leaf-spells vireo is endangered. The willow flycatcher is also endangered, state and federal. I guess both of those are.
And there's a lot of the fully protected species like the osprey, a lot of the least tern, you know, that use more the estuarine habitat and birds of prey, you know, all kinds of raptors, and all nesting birds are protected under the Nesting Bird Treaty Act. So we also have a species of special concern. It's not listed. It just has the potential to be listed, the pond turtle. And that has been found. It requires pools of water, which again, if you know water's levels changed or manipulated, could potentially negatively affect that species. The other one?
I think that's it then.
Yeah, I think that's.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we're going to have the cities of Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena, and Los Angeles.
Getting the survey course here.
Mike, look at Mike. Chairman Marcus, board members, my name is Bill Mace. I'm the Assistant General Manager for Water Systems at Burbank Water and Power. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to participate and highlight Burbank's efforts and progress in implementing the state's mandate for increased use of recycled water. You typically don't dwell on the cover slide, but I'd just like to point a couple things out here from this slide. Burbank was incorporated as a city to establish its independence from LA. They did not want to be part of Los Angeles. So as you can see from the city seals, we were incorporated in 1911, and it became clear to be independent, you had to control your water and power. So Burbank Water and Power, its predecessor, was founded in 1913. And in looking forward, you know, Burbank was an original member of the Metropolitan Water District in 1928, looking for the future. And 50 years later, after a 30-year court battle that ended in the state Supreme Court, a judgment was rendered that awarded all native waters within the San Fernando Valley, the upper Los Angeles River area, to Los Angeles. So consequently, all water supply for Burbank is imported, and conservation and increased efficiency can reduce imports, but at the end of the day, it's all still 100% import, and it always will be. Burbank has exclusive rights to the wastewater flows generated by treating and recycling the water imports, and we seek for the highest, best use of that water, and it's the only card we really have to play going forward. Next, let's see. So in terms of our water supply, water planning, and what we do, what this slide shows across a number of years going into the fiscal year of 17-18, all of our water is imported. The bottom blue is metropolitan treated water. The orange is metropolitan untreated water that we spread at Pacoima. And then the green is an import return credit that's calculated through the judgment. And that water is pumped from the basin, but we either added the water at the head of the basin or it's the import return credit. But all that water comes up through an operable unit, which is an integral part of groundwater cleanup and treatment in the basin. So as we go forward, that 10,000 acre feet a year also represents removal of contaminants, you know, from the basin. And of course, the purple is the recycled water, which we've been increasing use of, but also proportionately through the drought and conservation, the proportion has also increased, you know, just by virtue of less potable use. This next slide then shows where our gallons per capita per day have gone, you know, through the executive order. And Burbank did achieve a 32% reduction in relation to the calculation in the executive order. This is representative of all water used in Burbank, not just the residential use. But once again, you know, we've done what we can. And I have to say that Burbank, you know, the city councils, and the council's not static, but, you know, through all the decades, they've had vision, they had a plan, execution and operation of how to get Burbank as independent as possible. And this is, you've seen a picture before, this is the Burbank Water Reclamation Plan. It's been there sometime in one form or another since probably the late 50s, early 60s. It's been upgraded a number of times. In, I think, 1977, as a State Water Resource Control Board engineer, I inspected this plan as part of a PL 92-500 project, and it's much more advanced at this point than it was before. The solids from this plant go to Hyperion, because there wasn't land, or it wasn't really practical to treat solids there. And if there was hydraulic overflow, it would go down to Hyperion. The early use of recycled water in Burbank from this plant were in power plant cooling towers in the I-5 landscape. In 1993, Burbank took and initiated a recycled water system. We got loans from the State Board, which had just recently been paid off. We expanded the system up, and largely we're feeding the golf course and some other minor uses. Let's see this slide. Well, okay. I didn't know the animation was there. Anyway. Well, anyway, so out of Burbank, the daily wastewater generation was 11 million gallons per day. It was looked at as, okay, what else can we do? An equalization basin was proposed to take and treat more water at the plant, and also there'd be more water available in Burbank for recycling. So that was a $12.5 million project. The diurnal flows is what made this practical, was that, you know, in the late night, early morning hours, the plant was hydraulically underloaded. Rest of the day was overloaded. That water in the green section went to LA with the EQ basin. It would all pretty much be retained in Burbank for treatment and then, you know, potential use. So that was a $12.5 million project. At the same time that this was being proposed, Water and Power had applied and got a state planning grant for recycled water system expansion, since we would have a very consistent flow rate throughout the day. So with that grant, the master plan was completed in 2007. It was updated in 2010. The EQ basin was completed in 2010, and then Water and Power with bonds, state low-interest loans. We would have liked grants, we didn't get any, but so with bonds and low-interest loans, we proceeded to build out the system, which about $17 million. Mother, yeah, okay. Animation, that's yeah, well, anyway, so where we were in 2007, within the boundaries of Burbank, this is the extent of the purple piping. And some of that piping had been extended through some monies from our redevelopment agency. The Empire Center was developed, so we put requirements on the developers to do recycled water, and then we connected. So in 2007, that's where we were. Now, as we went forward into 2017, this is the system we have now in delivering that water. So in this recycled system expansion, just quickly, we added 28 miles of pipe, 158 customers, and they got an additional 1,000 acre feet a year of additional use. Now, also, the power plant got more efficient. So actually, we probably added 1,200 acre feet of other use. But anyway, we're at about 3,000 acre feet now. But one of the things that happened through the construction of the EQ basin, droughts, and conservation, that 11 MGD, which equates to about 12,000 acre feet a year, there's a lot less inflow to the plant now. It's on the order of 7.5 MGD, which is what I think was said earlier by the regional board. So that's about 8,500 acre feet a year. This table here kind of sets the numbers for the current condition. So with that 8,500 acre feet a year, and we're using 3,000 now between power plants and other uses, there's about 5,500 in round numbers available. Our proposed project is 1,600 acre feet. There's still water to be discharged to the river, but Burbank's position or desire would be that, yeah, we would continue to discharge it until we can find other highest, best use projects that can be reasonably developed to utilize that water. So when we talk about progress on recycled water conversions, this map, I don't know how clear, you can see where we've connected people. There's some that are yet to be connected, and there's others that are potential, where some of that 1,600 acre feet would go. But, you know, we've converted many sites. During the drought, we got all our schools converted that we could get a pipeline to. So the school district, you know, got off the dime and said, okay, we're gonna do that. And we even have it set up so that street sweepers and construction sites are using recycled water. Now, this is a map, you know, of our change of use, and I need to point out that within or outside the city of Burbank, there are sites at the city of Los Angeles where there are meters set or lines being constructed into the city of Los Angeles to deliver them recycled water. So we, you know, and this cooperation with LA, you know, which we have a lot of cooperation with Los Angeles, although we also have differences of opinion at times. But, you know, for instance, as we built the system, they asked to accommodate in design and sizing of Burbank's pipe. So we did that. They contributed $1 million to that upsizing of the piping. We also, with these construction projects that are shown going into the city of Los Angeles, those pipelines are under construction right now, under outside contractor, under contract to Burbank, but we get full reimbursement for Los Angeles. So Los Angeles is investing about $9 million here. And, you know, we have no problem, but we also are engaged in resource exchange with Los Angeles. So for every bucket or acre foot or drop of water we deliver to them, they will transfer to us a groundwater credit, which then allows us to reduce the waters we import to run through our operable unit. Currently, you know, it's a 300 acre feet. Let's see, the next slide shows that, you know, here's those things that, you know, are on the books here for these extensions. Woodbury University happened to really just abut the boundary of Los Angeles, so that didn't really require construction, but those other three listed projects are the subject of that construction. I just go back to that slide. Now, this area at the bottom middle where it says City of Los Angeles, that's the LA Equestrian Center. We've said many times to LA, sure, we could serve that, but they haven't come forward to say, yeah, let's do it. That's about 50 acre feet a year, but we're amenable to doing that. And I had conversations with LADWP officials, you know, when all this is being discussed, is could we provide them more water? Like they were thinking they could bring it up to Tillman or that area. Yeah, sure, we can work it out, you know, but none of those discussions have gone forward further. The other thing that Burbank has on the burner right now is we got a matching grant from the state board to study direct potable reuse, which will be completed by the end of this current fiscal year. And, you know, the question was, okay, what else can we do with our recycled water? We're looking at, you know, treatment units, footprint, costs, locations, and the regulations aren't there now. But we expect that when they are, we're not going to be waiting to decide, geez, maybe we should look at this now. We want to have a really good picture going forward of what we can do. So we also have, you know, in terms of trying to work within the basin and do these things, we've had also inquiries from Los Angeles customers of could we provide them recycled water? And we said, yeah, we could. We'd rather do it through the city and Department of Water and Power. So I'm not quite sure what all those politics are, but we're also amenable to that. Other interconnections with LA, we also, within a couple months, will have an operating interconnection of our potable water systems. And the water we will deliver to Los Angeles there will be groundwater that actually belongs to Los Angeles, but it'll come up through our operable unit, be cleaned, and then delivered to them. And there's going to be a significant expansion of that effort across the next 4 or 5 years. So that's another area we've been cooperating. So in looking at these things and what we do, we have other uses for this water. And we're looking always at this highest, best use. Now, just quickly, you've all seen these maps of the LA River already. I'm not up to belabor the locations of the plants and everything. But in terms of the state of the river and existing conditions, they're fundamentally different than the river's natural state, and I think that's been clear. Historically, it was an underground stream most of the year, and in the summer, the channel was dry. Okay, this map is just a context for all these different locations. Now, in looking, and you've seen these pictures too, so it's somewhat redundant, but with this one section, you can see where it's an unlined section. I think there's 6 miles, 7 miles like that, and because of upwelling groundwater, you couldn't have put concrete down. The groundwater just would have popped it up. It was an engineering impossibility. But most of the river is what's shown there on the left. But looking at, an average monthly flow in the rivers, you can see it's really responsive to wet weather events, and the flows can be as high in a given day to a storm as 1,000 CFS, and the dry weather flow, if you look at that dotted line across the bottom at the upper reaches about 50 CFS, which is pretty much the discharge from the Tillman plant. Looking at Fletcher Street during a rainstorm, it's much different than the shown at the bottom, But essentially, the existing system operates as a drainage channel. It's designed to move bursts of high-volume storm flow quickly downstream to avoid flooding. And so when we start having these discussions about revitalizing and restoring the river, I think it would be better described as transforming this river from what it is. It's a major intervention. It's not, how are we going to continue what we have there right now? And at the high flood or high flow stage, this river transforms itself yearly. You can see the scouring and the flows that go on. Things are not static in that river at those points. These pictures just south of Fletcher Street, you can see the scouring effects on the vegetation, and maybe it recovers in one area and not another. Any remaining native habitat has been greatly disturbed by, homeless encampments, invasive plant species, trash, and even vegetation management species to maintain the flow capacity of the river at high flows. And this last picture I have here, this shows the river below 6th Street, and this is, during a rain event. But when you typically see it, it's what you see in these action movies when they have car chases down the river. You can debate what the habitat is, but there's not much water there. But anyway, and this is reiterative of things said before, the river flows are primarily wastewater discharges, and they're seen as surface flow during the dry months due to concrete lining of the channel. If there was no concrete lining anywhere, you wouldn't see any water. And I have to point out, Burbank's water is 100% imported. All our water is tertiary treated, denitrified, and chlorinated, and I think the other plants have the same conditions. It's suitable for all uses, including recreational contact, and the only exception of the use is human consumption, just because of its source. DPR may change that, and that changes other highest best uses. But Burbank doesn't object to these transformation concepts that may in a decade or two actually become actualized projects. Our efforts are consistent with the state of the river and any return to its natural state. And, Burbank has and will continue to cooperate with LA to work towards these highest best uses of recycled water through resource exchange to minimize impacts or imports and associated energy expenditures, because water we don't import also reduces the energy, and it's significant to bring the water down. And I said we're working with other LA and other parties to maximize existing infrastructure for groundwater cleanup in a realistic and achievable time frame. But I have to return to the theme of Burbank's independence. They've worked very hard to be there. Our cooperation with LA should assist LA. They have a huge basket of projects, which you're going to hear about, to strike a balance of their wants, needs, and aspirations for import reduction and river transformation, but it has to be in consideration of their available water resources and obligations. And with that, I thank you, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Thank you, very interesting.
Again, based on the previous discussion of the potential resource value of the effluent in these concrete channels, and do you have any insight into what's been studied kind of just downstream of the Burbank discharge? Is there anything been talked about there? Because I know it's its location and whether it is independent of the LA River.
As part of our current efforts in a 1211 deal, we have completed CEQA compliance on that 1,600 acre feet, and it's a negative declaration.
Yeah.
You could talk about it for a couple hours, but that's the 30,000 foot look at it.
Yeah. You mentioned, being completely dependent on imported water. I didn't notice in those graphs if you had put in, local runoff or
No, we don't have any
stormwater runoff. Stormwater.
BWP, when we remodeled our campus, we put in demonstration projects for stormwater capture, and you can come look and see, here's what you can do in 3 or 4 or 5 different alternatives. But because of the judgment, we can capture stormwater, but it's not ours. So it's hard to sell city council on let's spend it. tens of millions of dollars in something that doesn't address our water resources. Now, going forward with development and redevelopment, I think people that are doing new projects ought to be required to do that. But as far as a effort that we could do to change anything about our water resource picture, it's zero.
Well, thanks for that clarification. That's what I sensed, but I wanted that, that's useful to clarify. Thank you.
It's fascinating, thanks.
And also, thanks for, it was a great presentation too. Thanks to the citizens of Burbank for doing a great job on conservation.
Thanks for the free Wi-Fi too at Metrolink near the airport. So I hope that was supposed to be okay. While you're setting it up, conscious of people's time, I will take at some point a very quick morning bio break, and we'll take a relatively, for me, maybe not for you, early lunch. That'll be short because I know people have their jobs to get back to, et cetera. But I'm mindful of the fact that we're past the normal morning bio break, but I want to be able to keep the flow of the conversation. So we'll take a very short one, and then we'll take maybe a half-hour lunch break sometime during the lunch hour period.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman and board members. My name is Richard Rule. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me just start with a brief background on the city of LA and where we get our water. City of Glendale. Whoa. My boss would talk to me about that. Independence, yes, thanks. Glendale was incorporated in 1906. It's the third largest city in LA County with approximately 200,000 residents and about 34,000 water service connections. Our demand is currently about 24,000 acre feet, which includes both potable and recycled water, and we are one of 13 founding member agencies dating from 1928. What are our water sources? Well, similar to what Bill said, we are reliant almost exclusively on imported water. Our direct imports account for about 60% of our supply. That's directly from the Bay Delta or the Colorado River. Another 30% comes from imported return flows, which refers to the importer water that we sell in the San Fernando Basin that eventually reaches groundwater. The San Fernando Basin there on the left is the white portion south of the Verdugo Mountains that's within the city limits of Glendale. And you may know this is an adjudicated basin through the 1979 judgment for Ulara, Upper LA River area. And that judgment limits the amount of return flow that we can pump from the San Fernando Basin. The green area there north of the Verdugo Mountains is the Verdugo Basin. That is our only prescriptive water rights that we have. That accounts for about 5% of our supply. And then recycled water currently is about 7% of our supply. If you add all that up, the bottom line is we are 95% reliant on imported water. We're glad to be able to serve a number of disadvantaged community members and severely disadvantaged community members depicted by this map. They are centralized in South and West Glendale, as you can see. The yellow indicating the disadvantaged community areas, and the brown is the severely disadvantaged community areas. As I said, we're 95% reliant on imported water. In the San Fernando Basin, to go into a little more detail, LA, as you've heard, owns all the water rights, native water rights in that basin, which means the surface water and any groundwater resulting from precipitation. Glendale's return flow credit, or the imported return flow that I called it earlier, is limited to 20% of the delivered water that we sell in the San Fernando Basin, including recycled water. If we go above that, we pay a physical solution cost to the city of LA, or we can rely on our return flow credit banked water rights that we have. The challenges of imported water, we all know it's expensive, but probably more importantly, it's of questionable reliability. We all saw what happened during the drought, how that affects the reliability of imported water. And Glendale has done its part to address this lack of reliable supply by reducing its potable water use by 20% during the drought. Our mandated tier was 18%, and we exceeded that goal. Fortunately, Glendale has rights to the wastewater flows generated by its imported water, and that's through the Joint Powers Agreement with the City of LA that gives Glendale the rights to 50% of the water treated at LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant, or LAGWRP. The history of Glendale and LA working together dates back even before LAGWRP was built. In 1969, the Joint Powers Agreement was signed with LA to study the feasibility of building LAGWRP. Once it was built, Glendale became co-owner of the plant and shares in its cost of running the plant 50-50, and also shares 50-50 in the tertiary treated water that comes from the plant. Treatment capacity of the plant, as you've heard, is 20 million gallons a day. The current average treatment, though, however, is about 16 million gallons a day, or 18,000 acre-feet of treated water. Glendale's half of that then would be 9,000 acre-feet that they are entitled to. Our current recycled water use varies by season, but let's call it 2,000 acre-feet for this purpose. That leaves 7,000 acre-feet of Glendale's portion of their treated water that is currently returned to the LA River. Water, of course, that could be used to meet non-potable demands. We are doing our best to maximize that use as per state goals and declarations, and we will continue to do so. Our history of recycled water use dates back to 1978. First use was for the cooling towers at the Grayson Power Plant. Between 1992 and 2014, we invested over $20 million in expanding our recycled water system. Whoops, there we go, that would help. And that $20 million resulted in 21 miles of recycled water mains, 6 pump stations, 5 storage tanks, 78 recycled customers currently, mostly for irrigation, but also for cooling, dual plumbing, and dust control. Our existing use, as I say, is 1,700 to 2,000 acre-feet per year. Our proposed expansion through the change petition is for 3,500 acre-feet per year. 400 of that would be used within the city limits of Glendale, and 3,100 acre-feet per year would be pumped over the hill to Pasadena. This is water that we are currently under contract with to provide to Pasadena. We are obligated to provide that amount to them. This shows the overview of our infrastructure for recycled water. The purple pipe is our existing system. You can see it spans from the east to the west city boundaries. Some of the larger users are Forest Lawn at the very southern tip of Glendale. Oakmont Country Club is at the northeast, at the end of the northeast spur there on the upper right. The future pipes are represented in the various colors. The blue there in the west is for Hoover, Toll, Keppel schools, 3 separate schools, about a 1.5 mile stretch of pipe. The green pipe is what we call the Glendale T. That will serve the downtown area for mainly buildings that have already been installed with dual plumbing. There'll also be some amount of irrigation on that T. The orange line is to serve Chevy Chase Golf Course there to the tune of about 100 acre-feet, and then the blue would serve 2 housing developments, Chevy Oaks and Camina San Rafael. The remaining portion of the 3,500 to 3,100 acre feet a year is what would go to Glendale, to Pasadena, to serve various locations, including the Rose Bowl, Caltech, Pasadena City College, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and several other schools, parks, and golf courses. In addition to the planning efforts that went in for recycled water use when Lagwark was first built, there have been additional planning efforts. In 1983, there was an EIR for wastewater reclamation facilities, including Glendale, Pasadena, and portions of LA. Then in 1993, we signed the agreement with Pasadena for providing them recycled water. Glendale's system was then built to accommodate that anticipated demand from Pasadena, including some of the pumping facility at Lagwark. Beyond the state goals of promoting use of recycled water, Glendale's own municipal code does the same thing. It states that we shall extend and enhance local water supplies by using recycled water for special non-potable purposes to free up potable supplies for higher use. The table down below summarizes the flows in the change petition. This is the annual average amount of wastewater discharge currently from Lagwark is about 10,500 acre feet, or 9.3 million gallons a day. This is a little bit less than the previous regional board speaker that I think had it at 9.9. These are 2016 numbers, and I think she was in 2015. At any rate, the proposed reduction through the change petition is 3,500 acre feet, which would leave a discharge of 7,000 acre feet that would be going to the LA River. The benefits of recycled water use, you're all aware of, but it provides for city and regional benefit of reducing imported water from the Delta and Met. It increases our water supply reliability, and we feel it maximizes beneficial use. I think we would contend that multiple uses are better than one. Similar to what Bill said, we rely on imported water, whether it's directly from Met, whether it's return flow from pumping groundwater that results from imported water, or using wastewater that results from imported water. Our goal is to reuse that water as many times as possible, rather than discharge a highly treated water to the ocean. And with that, take questions.
Thank you very much. Question, do you have a question?
Well, thank you for the presentation too, and also the citizens of Glendale for conservation. Glendale and Burbank both already have systems in place. You just showed the maps of the existing systems, and these are proposed expansions. Do you have any comments or recollection of the wastewater change petition process for those previous recycled water projects that are already delivering?
For what's already been built, my understanding is that there was no change petition process for those projects. That this is a new venture.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. I mean, I could ask questions of all of you, everybody who's spoken all day, but I'm mindful of people's time. It's a very good, no, you should, go ahead. And get any questions over here. Just getting an overview, it's the beginning of conversation, so.
Chair Marcus, thank you, and board members, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Evelyn Cortez Davis. I'm the Assistant Director of Water Resources at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and I'll be discussing with you an update on our recycled water projects and generally our water supply picture and how that balances with the Los Angeles River topic that we'll be discussing today. The water sources this is a very familiar map to probably everyone here. We discussed it at length yesterday. I won't belabor the points here about the limited sources locally that we have in Los Angeles. I will be honing in on the local groundwater piece at the bottom of the map today. We have quite a number of water supply planning efforts within the city of Los Angeles that LADWP undertakes in partnership with other agencies at times and under the direction, excuse me, of our mayor of Los Angeles. Recycled water, water conservation, and groundwater, along with stormwater, are critical components of our water supply picture, and all inform our urban water management plan, which is prepared every 5 years as directed by the Department of Water Resources. So I will be focusing in today on two of those components, although I don't want to take away the critical nature of the other pieces. Specifically, water conservation has been absolutely critical in Los Angeles. Angelenos have been asked to conserve time and again, and they have stepped up and done so to extreme success that we've had here in Los Angeles. We have the same water use today than we did 40 years ago, with 1 million more residents. This is something that we're very proud of in Los Angeles, but we recognize that conservation alone is not going to cut it anymore. We have to expand our portfolio, and that's what our urban water management plan really guides us toward. And so the water supply picture for Los Angeles generally looks like this. We have, on average, been very dependent in the recent years. One, purchased imported water through the Metropolitan Water District, which is the light blue portion of the pie on the left side here. Our own Los Angeles Aqueduct provides water that may have some limitations on it as well. We are hopeful and have actively been pursuing plans to expand our use of groundwater and our use of recycled water, and want to make sure that the portfolio that you see on the right is the more diverse picture that we want to work towards in the future, including the expansion of recycled water use.
You know, I've talked about these pies with San Diego. Could you go back? I think we need to start treating conservation differently going forward on water budgets. This is all, you know, to the management, because what you really should do is shrink the pie, you know, or look at income and expense as far as water supply and demand. So, you know, this was useful in getting folks to buy into conservation, but conservation is not a supply. It's like saying it's income and expense. Income is your supply, expense is what your demand. And so you're reducing your expense. Does that mean you have a higher income? No, it means you've reduced your expense. So I think communication to the Californians, we need to change on this.
Reduction of demand
Yeah.
is what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I mean,
So
I
there are
get it.
different ways to represent that.
Yeah.
So
I
moving
think going
forward, we'll have
forward,
to
we should
consider that
put it
into the
different.
future. Talking about our stormwater capture efforts, we have two components that were examined in our development of the stormwater capture master plan for the city, which was completed in 2015. We have centralized projects which focus on the improvements of centralized facilities that are operated by Los Angeles County Flood Control Districts, the dams in the mountain areas above the city, and the centralized stormwater capture spreading grounds within the valley floor in the San Fernando Valley. We also have a distributed set of projects that include items like cisterns, dry wells, rain gardens, swales, green streets, and other sub-regional types of projects that are either site-specific or neighborhood focused. So this is a plan that's available on our website today, and we are in the process of pursuing projects along to increase stormwater capture throughout the city and in particular in the San Fernando Valley. Water recycling in the upper Los Angeles River watershed, as we've heard a few times this morning, is taking place with water supplied from 3 main plants, 2 of them operated by the city of Los Angeles under LA Sanitation. The water is then in partnership with LA Sanitation distributed by the LA Department of Water and Power to customers throughout the city. Water from Burbank Water Reclamation Plant also allows us to, in partnership with Burbank, align customers where we may be able to not be able to supply them within our own distribution system as easily or as efficiently as we might in partnership with Burbank. So we certainly appreciate those opportunities to partner. I'm going to give you a snapshot, a very busy map here of approximately 22 current recycled water users highlighted in yellow for the city of Los Angeles, and future recycled water users are highlighted in white. We have on the right side, you can see we have a number of those, as pointed out by Bill a little bit earlier, that would be planned to be supplied from the Burbank Water Reclamation Plant. So again, these partnerships are very important to us. Our purple pipe system emanates from the center, generally the center of the map there, at Donald C. Tillman, and expands outward. We have a number of projects that are obviously been operating for a number of years, and we have plans to continue expanding. At this point, I'm going to be going over some of that information with you. Here is a map for the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant, a purple pipe system. And again, we have roughly 25 existing recycled water users and about 17 future recycled water users that have been identified that would be supplied from the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant. Here is the takeaway on this very busy set of maps for you. The city of Los Angeles has gone as far as we can to implement recycled water projects without seeing some kind of impact to flows to the Los Angeles River. We, in order to continue forward in implementing even some of the projects identified in white here, not all, but some of them, we're going to have to take into account what happens if those uses do end up resulting in reductions to river flows as they exist today. So one of the things that we've done, and I'm not sure if I'm able to ask Janine to help with this, but there's a table that I brought that has information on the recycle. You already have it. See, she's way ahead of me. Thank you, Janine. That identifies current and planned projects by the city of Los Angeles that may, in our estimation at this time, affect flows to the Los Angeles River. There are 8 of them identified here. There are various phases of concept planning through design, and we are at this point evaluating how to proceed with these projects. I wanted to highlight a couple of these. The first on this list is the Arbor project, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers project in partnership with the city of Los Angeles. It identifies a number of projects within an 11-mile focused study area known as the Area with Restoration Benefits and Opportunities for Revitalization, which is what Arbor stands for. I'm learning my acronyms even more today. And it extends from the Headwork site down to First Street, just south of, right around where downtown Los Angeles is. And this, it is projected to have some consumptive use of water within the river that is projected. I did want to point your attention to one of the other projects here on this table, which is one that we are conceptualizing now, and that pertains to the flow-through features, the lakes within the Sepulveda Basin. That includes the Japanese Garden Lake adjacent to the Donald C. Tillman plant, Lake Balboa, and the Wildlife Lake. All of these lakes flow water through today, and the water ultimately goes to the Los Angeles River. There was a presentation, I think Chris Morris was talking about exactly all of the various places the water goes after that, and then ultimately ends up in the river. The flow through is critical for these lakes to maintain water quality and to avoid algal blooms, fish kills, and odor problems. These are highly valued recreational areas, and obviously there's a commitment that we have to maintaining that. It's a significant amount of water that flows through these lakes, approximately 22 million gallons per day. And this is water that would be, we would want to examine whether it's possible to recirculate this water and use it more efficiently so that we can continue to maintain the water quality and the habitat within these flow-through features, and at the same time be able to take advantage of the water resource that is there for the city if possible. Clearly, anything that is on this table, we would need to evaluate fully what the cumulative environmental impacts would be of such a project. So I did want to also point out items 6, 7, and 8 on this table, which all pertain to stormwater capture. Some of them are driven by compliance with TMDLs or other MS4 related requirements, or the enhanced watershed management plans for the upper LA River area. Ultimately and conjunctively, these projects are projected to have dry weather flows be reduced to zero eventually. And clearly they will not all be implemented at once, they will be phased in, but we need to really think through potential impacts if those dry weather flows go to zero in the eventual future. As you saw, what the dependence is on dry weather flows, what the dry weather flow dependence is on flows from the plants and on dry weather flow, there isn't really very much left after that, and I'm going to get to that point with a little bit more detail in a moment. I did want to also touch on some of the concepts that have not necessarily been elevated to projects quite yet, but we are definitely examining at the City of LA. So we have a number of them here that possibly would, they're not necessarily, again, all projects that would be pursued at the same time. We would need to evaluate not just the value, but our ability to be able to operate them and what we would get out of each. I wanted to point out, for example, item number 9 here is the concept of taking water from the LA River and recharging into the Los Angeles forebay. This is something that's very much a concept right now. We don't know how that would look. If we were to pursue something like this, this is something that we would want to begin quantifying and describing the scope a little bit more in depth before we can go and analyze it fully. So
where's the LA forebay? I know I should know.
It's just on south of the 10 freeway. If you can, I don't know if you're familiar with the LA area, but south of downtown, and goes down toward the Central Basin. So I don't have a good map for you. I apologize, I did not load that. But we can get that for you if you're interested. I also wanted to point out there's a possibility, and Bill brought this up, this very relevant discussion on direct potable reuse discussion at the regulatory level today, where this is not something that is a reality now, but the regulations are in our future. We believe that we need to plan and have a vision for what happens when or if direct potable reuse does become a regulatory reality for water suppliers in general, and particular for the City of Los Angeles. So we're looking at the concept of taking water from, that is the City of Los Angeles's allocation from the LAG, Los Angeles Glendale Water Reclamation Plant, and having it contribute to our distribution system directly. We have a large set of reservoirs that are under construction now, and they're in the immediate vicinity of the LAG plant. They're potable water reservoirs, and so if there were a mechanism by which we could utilize water from LAG for direct potable reuse, that would be a transition that would be potentially possible depending on what the treatment scheme is that is required in the future. So these are some of the concepts that we're looking at collectively in LA. And again, I want to underline the point that we have sort of reached the point of no return, where we have adjusted our system to the best possible efficiency. Our partners at LA Sanitation work every day to try and help us maximize the way that we deliver our water, and without impacting the LA River. At this point, we are pretty much maxed out. So that's where we are. Wanted to bring you a little bit of information today about the low flow study that was just it's in the process of being completed now. It's the Los Angeles River low flow study conducted under the One Water LA planning effort. This is an integrated water planning effort led by LA Sanitation in partnership with LADWP, and it is has many different components, one of which is Los Angeles River and examining water from the Los Angeles River as one water. So taking all the drinking water, stormwater, recycled water, groundwater, river water, and planning around these resources as one resource. So in the interest of serving that integrated purpose, we wanted to identify for this flow study, the purpose was to identify considerations, assumptions, and possible areas of study in the future that would be needed in order to actually determine that the question that gets asked so much: what is the optimal flow condition in the river? The challenge is, I think, in part, not only are we challenged with being able to foresee the vision for the river itself, because the question tends to be cyclical. How much water does the river need? Well, what do you need the water for? What are the uses? And so what is the vision? And so we're going to have a great presentation in a few minutes from our mayor's office that will talk about what City of LA is envisioning for this river. But
as part of that, are you also looking at flood control issues?
So yes, so flood control is certainly one of the functions of the river channel as it sits today. So whatever revitalization takes place has to be managed in concert with that, because we can't sacrifice the flood control function. So, and we will have some of that information. So in the end, what we're aiming to do in the City of LA is to make sure that we're balancing our water supply needs, which are dire. In certain cases, we've just come off of a drought. We went from a severe drought condition to a record-setting runoff condition, and we're having to manage both in ways that we haven't necessarily been able to, haven't had to deal with very often. So we want to make sure that any water-dependent uses that are envisioned or regulatory requirements that exist for the river are balanced with that. So there were 4 major components to our low flow study, and in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the second, which is the low flow analysis. We also did a brief historical review of ecological surveys that are already on record, and then we went back and looked at some of the assumptions that the Army Corps Arbor study utilized for their water budgets, etc., and then also looked at river storage potential, but I will be focusing on item 2 today. So you've seen this picture many times. Our study focused on creating mile by mile hydrologic modeling for all 51 miles of the river, so inflows and outflows for all 51 miles. And we also modeled in a little bit more detail cross-sectional impacts based on flows at 3 different locations. The first is labeled number 1 is Los Feliz. Number 2 is Taylor Yard, and the third is Willow Street down in the concrete line portions in Long Beach. So I wanted to walk you through what the flow, the existing flow condition is, because that's what the main purpose of the analysis was. So this is a big, just general picture of what the river dry weather flow conditions were between the years of 2013 through 2015, which happened to also coincide with the driest of the drought period years in the recent past. You see basically the total flow in the river at its origin in Canoga Park at mile 51 and outflow to the ocean at the mouth at the end of the graph here. You see the bumps in flow go up based on the locations of the Tillman plant, DCT, Burbank plant. You see the bump in flow go up, and then again when you hit the LAG plant flow. The locations of the studies, the cross-sectional studies in our analysis are also labeled 1, 2, and 3. So what I wanted to do is
I'm assuming then that big bump after LA Glendale is all contributing stormwater.
Sure, and
from
so
irrigation runoff.
yes, so I want to say that the
groundwater,
Rio Hondo
right, groundwater.
confluence is likely the big bump that you see there is the Rio Hondo confluence. But
Thank you.
yes. So what I wanted to do is to show you the components of this flow a little bit differently. So if you look at the legend at the bottom, the blue that I just showed you is the cumulative additive flows put together. The purple is the flow from the water reclamation plants going from the zero line all the way to the top of the purple. Then you have incidental urban runoff contributions and also the upwelling of groundwater. Down below you have losses due to evapotranspiration. And so you have various components playing different parts depending on what reach of the river you're located at. So what happens is, if I take away the total flow, which show you the components here, we know, and we've been hearing all throughout the morning, that the quantity of the recycled water coming from the water reclamation plants is likely to be reduced. And we have very specific plans to pursue expanded recycled water use to be continuing to be able to supply to our residents the water that we need. So it is important to note that while this water is there today, it will not be there necessarily in those quantities in the future, and that's certainly important to note. The component, if I take away the evapotranspiration and just boil it down to the water that's actually there, you see that the most significant, of course, as has been mentioned in the earlier presentations, is the flow from the 3 plants. If we were to reduce that significantly, the next more larger flow is from incidental urban runoff. This is flow that is also, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, going to be reduced over time because of TMDL compliance, MS4, and other regulatory requirements. So this is not necessarily flow that's going to go away tomorrow, but it's something that we cannot plan in as a permanent supply for whatever we envision the river to be. The blue segment is upwelling groundwater, and this is along the 8-mile portion of the river that has a soft bottom that was mentioned a little bit earlier. This is water exiting from the San Fernando groundwater basin. This is water that is really part of the San Fernando Valley aquifer, San Fernando Basin aquifer, to the extent that LADWP has been underpumping water rights in the San Fernando groundwater basin, which we heard a little bit about yesterday. When we have an optimal condition and remediation in order to increase groundwater pumping in the city of LA, it is entirely possible that the upwelling also will not be a reliable source of water in the soft bottom reaches of the river. So what we're dealing with is a potential condition where we have to find that balance and do it well so that we don't cause a cumulative impact that is unintended. While you might have a project that is small, once you have them added together, it could have a significant impact in the future. So one of the things that I want to make sure that I leave you with is that our intent in the city of LA is to make sure that we do conduct that cumulative environmental impact analysis. While we know that we're moving forward, we want to move forward with more recycled water projects, we recognize that it is not necessarily going to be possible to do that without conducting that environmental impact analysis. And that where our planned and potential projects look like could be driven in part, or how they're mitigated could be driven in part by that cumulative environmental impact analysis. So as part of our next steps, we are going to be pursuing that environmental impact analysis. We hope to get as much input as possible from all of the entities that have a role to play within that. We will be looking at evaluating our list of planned and potential projects as a result. We're also going to be participating with the LA County Department of Public Works in their development of the LA River Master Plan update, which is already kicking off and it should be underway very soon. This is the one document that really oversees the function of the LA River as a whole in all its 51 miles. So we are de facto committee members, I have learned, so we're going to be participating in that. And we are going to be also working to prepare a future City of Los Angeles 1211 petition to accommodate the reductions that we might foresee based on what we've presented today and how they shape based on our analysis coming up. And that's all I have for you this morning.
Thank you very much. Do you have questions?
Take some questions.
That was very complete.
Yeah, excellent presentation, and I didn't mean to give you a hard time about the thing about San Diego. Sorry about that concert. It's just fun to think about. I think we're queuing up presentations about this idea. You cast it as a question of environmental impact, but obviously there's water resource benefits to all those projects.
Absolutely.
That you described. But I just wanted to say, are we going to now in the next presentations hear about how we can design a low flow, so it's more affirmative. You talk about, there's impacts of doing all these good things. Is there an effort underway to design the LA River low flow that's needed? Because it's really hard to say if you go historical, it's all underground, and so that's what I'm hoping to hear today is thoughts about what are we going to manufacture, to have a good ecological, good recreational value to the LA River that is sustainable and balanced with the need for water resources.
Do you have estimated date of completion for the cumulative environmental impacts analysis and then the master plan as well?
So the environmental impacts analysis is something that we are just now launching. I don't have a schedule laid out quite yet, but as soon as we do, if that's of interest to the board, we certainly can communicate that. I know that we have been in some conversations with the LA County team that's going to be undertaking the River Master Plan update. I'm not aware of their exact timeline now, but they are launching, and I would hate to commit them to a timeline because I'm not aware of it. But it is something that is going to be comprehensive in what they do. So it's not going to be an overnight process for them either.
And since you're at the front end, I guess, on the cumulative environmental impacts, and we have the benefit of having Glendale and Burbank here, I wonder if they could comment as to their participation or planned participation in sort of that analysis.
Well, we've actually done a flow analysis for the project we have on the board, and one of our comments to LA was they ought to take that and build on it, because we spent quite a bit of money doing that. And I'm not willing to foreclose our future use of water. Like I say, we have water rights, we have things we're trying to do, highest, best use, and so there's no pre-agreement along those lines.
It's part of our change petition. There is a CEQA process that has commenced. It will be completed, and there'll be a determination as to what the result of that study is. Beyond that, you know, we're willing to talk about cooperating, but, you know, this change petition, which entails obligated water to Pasadena, you know, that's kind of a separate thing in our view.
Thank you.
We have to figure out how to bring it all together. But I'd love to launch right into the next presentation, but mindful of having missed the bio break and the fact that there's sort of a logical break now. We can't just keep going. I'm going to ask that we take the lunch break right now, just for a half hour. And just because there's cafeteria there are cafes there, just grab something and then we'll get back into the conversation as soon as is reasonably practical. Let's say we'll start again at 10 after 12. Okay, so I need to get Wi-Fi. Also, I'm going nuts.